How do I get into player development? This is a question I'm asked consistently. How do I get into player development? I found out about it. They either found out from seeing someone else in the role, seeing it at their university, or they checked out the player development pod. But either way it goes, people ask, how do I get into player development? I actually shared a podcast episode, as some of you all listened to, finally sharing, how I got into player development role. I thought I couldn't share it for a while, and I did. You can catch it up here somewhere up here. The card is there. Check out that podcast episode. But today, I want to talk about 5 steps you can take that will help you get into the player development role. Now, once again, I wish I could place every single person that comes and asks me about the player development role who I think would be great at it. Doesn't always happen like that. But these 5 steps will help make the path clearer to help you get into the role that you seek. Hello. My name is Ed Jones II. I'm the founder of Beyond the Field, where we help people like you create impactful plans. And today we're going to talk about having a plan to get into player development. And so I really love talking about this topic. I've talked about it for since I got in the role in 2016, I've been talking about it. So 8 years of talking about it. And so I'm excited to talk about it. Like I said, I was in the role at the University of Houston, University of Kansas, and Baylor. And these are a few things that I saw as I helped people when I was in the role and help people now get into the role. One person I want to shout out before I get started is my guy, Arkeem Bird, who just became the assistant director of player engagement for the Minnesota Vikings. Love his story. I'm going to talk about his story here, but Arkeem, so awesome seeing you get to player development or player engagement at the NFL. Keep going, my guy. Keep going. Some other people that I have had the pleasure of helping along their journey are John Battle at Duke, Rod Rukchungung at Georgia State, CJ Scrimp at Coastal Carolina. I've helped Faith Gurdon. She's doing it at the high school, middle school level in Indiana. She's just transitioned to ODU. And so there's a lot more people. I have a whole list. Maybe we'll do an episode with them and just interview them all, of people that I've helped get into the role. And so let's talk about the 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 steps you need to take to help your path into the role. Number 1, you need to understand the role. Okay? Player development is a lot more than the pictures and videos and highlights that you see on LinkedIn, Twitter, things like that. The role encompasses so much. And so you need to understand the role. And to help you all better understand each one of these tips, I'm going back to a series I did in 2023 about starting in player development. So we're going to check out tip or step number 1, understanding the role, in this video here. You interested in getting into player development? Do you really want to get into it? Do you want to know some steps that you can take to get into player development? I'm doing a 5-episode series that will help you understand and help you make the right choices that can get you on the path of getting into player development. One of the greatest questions I get all the time is, how do I get into player development? Honestly, with you all here, this series was birthed out of a phone call I had in the airport last week. I put out a post on social media that talked about, what I've told people who want to get in this role. And I'm like, you know what? I've had over 500 plus conversations on phone, in person, about player development. I'm going to make this series and I'm just going to turn everybody to this series. But I want to help you all. There's a lot of you all that are sports management students. A lot of you all maybe transitioning careers in athletics or coming from outside athletics who want to know about player development. So this 5-episode series is for you. So tune in and I want you to listen to all of them. As you're learning about player development, wanting to get in player development, doing your research is important. It is very important. You need to figure out the role. And in figuring out the role, you need to figure out who you want to talk to. There are a plethora of professionals who are willing to talk to you about player development. Matter of fact, jump to season 2 of this podcast. I interviewed 15 of them. Okay. But you need to figure out who you want to talk to. So once you figure out who you want to talk to, the second thing is, what can you find out about them? Like I said, I have a lot of interviews on season 2, a lot of episodes where I'm talking to player development professionals, and these people are incredible and they want to help people. Now their schedules won't allow them to talk to everybody,
So you go listen to a podcast. Another thing you can do, this is what I do when I want to learn from somebody, I want to meet somebody. Go to, if you use Apple Podcasts, if you use Spotify podcast, if you use YouTube, go in, type their name, whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts or get your extra educational content, type in a person's name. It will come up. Episodes they've been on, podcasts they've been on, things that they've done. Maybe it's on Twitter and they got a quick, segment of what they've done or a behind the scenes deal. That is research. That allows you to get on the phone if you get the opportunity, or if you slide in a DM, or if you reach out on LinkedIn or whatever it is. That gives you opportunity to land somewhere that to the person, to the professional, it looks intentional. So when I get messages on LinkedIn and messages a lot of different places, I try my best to respond to everybody. But the honest truth is when people reach out to me and they have either said, hey, I heard you talk about this, or hey, I saw you do this, or hey, blah, blah, blah. It's easier for me to reach out to them because I know I'm not about to have a conversation about what is player development, how can I get into it, what is your role, what do you do? I've addressed this so many times. This is season 3 of this podcast. We're going into season 4. We're about to have a conference. And I'm not saying that, please hear me out. I'm trying to say that with as much humility as possible, but also putting the onus on you as the person who wants to get in this field. You have to do your research. Don't get on this phone call or don't get with someone and you have them doing all the work. You need to do the work. So make sure you're doing research. Another thing, the last thing I'll touch on is when you're doing this research, look at what they've accomplished. Okay, if somebody's a 40 under 40, congratulate them. If somebody just wrote a book, congratulate them. If somebody just started a podcast, congratulate them. If someone just, got a promotion, congratulate them. But look at what they accomplished and see what they accomplished. And maybe there's a quote. Once again, there might be a quote in an article. It may be a quote on their page. It may be some of their posts. Then you connect to that. But look at what people have accomplished, because if you want to be in a role, it can give you a blueprint on what you would want to accomplish in the role. And so that's a quick episode. This, like I said, this is part 1 of a 5-part podcast series about getting into player development. And the number one thing for you to do is to do your research on the role and the people in the role. I will say this about the role before I take off. The role, you may see it online as pictures from community service or pictures at a career fair, pictures here. It is way deeper than that. I enjoyed all my time. I enjoyed all the pictures, all the events we did. That was probably 30%, and that might be a reach of the job. So once again, make sure you do your research on the role and the people in the role.
All right, if you listen to this podcast, matter of fact, if you listen to 1 episode, hit the like button. If you listen to 10 plus, hit the like button. If you listen to 20 plus, hit the like button. If you listen to 30 plus, put your name in the show notes in the comments and say, I've listened to 30 or more, and on up from 30 to how many ever you listen. But if you listen to this podcast, you should know the role. If you've listened to this podcast, you should understand the role by now. There, in a sense, is no excuse anymore. In 2016, I didn't know what the role was. But not only is there the player development pod, I have the player development newsletter. We had the player development conference. I have blogs, different videos, and I have the player development guide, which is a book that talks about what I did in the role at Houston, Kansas, and Baylor. It's in the show notes, the player development guide. You can purchase it. It'll be in your email by the end of this video, $20. But as I say, there's no excuse to not understand the role anymore. So if you're looking to get into it, you should know the role, okay? There should be no more questions of, so what do you do in a role, right? There's a lot of material out there, between the topics I've had or the interviews I've had with people in the role. You can check it out up here. I've had over, I think, 15 interviews with people in the role, and they are discussing the role. So the first step is understanding the role. The second step is to have a plan, okay? Have a plan. You understand the role, now have a plan. Break down those things that you want to do in the role that you've learned, okay? Have a plan. It will help you, okay? Watch this video that talks about that.
No one cares about your passion until you have a plan. I'll say that again. No one cares about your passion until you have a plan. Now, I'm bringing this up. I had a conversation last week, and this is part 2 of our series of getting into player development. And the person on the phone was like, well, where do I start? Like, how do I do this? I'm passionate about players. I'm passionate about the transition. I'm passionate about athletes and my playing career, what I did after that. And I'm just really, really passionate. And this is the commonality of a lot of calls I get. There's this individual who is super passionate about helping athletes, which is incredible, which is great. But you have to have a plan, or no coach, no administrator, no executive is going to listen to you. Thank you so much for being here. This is part 2, as I said earlier, of our 5-part podcast series on getting into player development. This was kind of sparked from a conversation I had, one of the 500 conversations on the phone or in person or even messaging that I've had about player development. And so what I wanted to do is kind of bring all these messages here. And today we are talking about having a plan as you transition to player development. So let's say you're on the phone once again with someone and someone has a position, or you go to our conference, you get a chance to network. Shout out to the Player Development Conference, May 19th, May 20th. The link is in the show notes, all virtual. You can do it wherever you need to be. But you have this opportunity and you're passionate and you get to present to a coach, or you're a former coach. A lot of people get a chance. I tell them, go back. If you're an athlete, go back to the people who recruited you. Maybe it's not your head coach, but the assistant coach who recruited you. And you have all this passion. They know you're passionate, but you have to have a plan. So your question is, where do I start with this plan? What I always tell people is start with what you're most passionate about. So if you're passionate about financial education, just start there. Hey, this is a financial education plan. Here's budgeting. Here's finance. Here's other things, right? In financial education. But that's a plan. You're starting with that. You talk about how you can help athletes in financial education. If it's community impact or community engagement, start there. Hey, here are some organizations we could connect with. Here's some places we can make impact in the city, in the state. Different organizations that are doing things around the world. Start there. If it's mentorship, start with mentorship. Create a mentorship plan for your student athletes. Just start with something. What I also tell people is, when you were an athlete, what do you think was missing? Whatever you think was missing, create a plan for what was missing that would have made and enhanced your experience as a student athlete and taking it to the next level. So that's that. You have to have a plan, because the passion's awesome. Trust me, the passion is awesome. And there's a lot of people who care about player development. And this is even on the side of, I've worked with people like, for lack of a better word, vendors, or people who are outside the program who want to work with our student athletes or want to speak in front of our student athletes, whatever it may be. And I'm like, okay, so what do we have? I'm passionate, want to help student athletes. And then I'm like, all right, awesome. What do we have? What are we going to do? What's the takeaway from this? So if you're listening to this and you're really passionate about helping student athletes and you're like, man, I want to transition here, I want to transition this place, do that. A lot of you all that listen are transitioning from academics to player development. You already have an academic background. Your plan could be an academic background or academic plan that engages other aspects of their life. But whatever it is, once again, no one cares about your passion unless you have a plan. Once again, no one cares about your passion until you have a plan.
Video says it. You got to have a plan, okay? Now, if you are looking for an elite player development experience, learning experience, where you will leave with a certified plan, you need to come to the player development or be a part of the player development cohort. Click the link in the show notes, the player development cohort. Me and you will meet. We'll talk about it. But it is a multi-week cohort where I dive into all that I knew to create a plan and help you create your own plan to not only get in a player development role, but if you're in the role listening to this and you need to flesh out a plan, it is there for you as well. Can't wait for the cohort. Can't wait for you to join. So having a plan is vital. Step number 3. Know your value. What value can you provide to the player development professional, department, or program that you're going to join, right? Or the position, if it's just going to be you running it. What is the value? Everybody has value inside, right? The reason why you're watching this, the reason why you want to get into this is because of some value you want to provide to someone else, right? You want to provide value to someone else's life. So then know that value when you're meeting or if you're interviewed, and understand how to communicate that. Now, I'm not going to take all the fire from this video. Y'all know it by now. Check out this video about knowing your value.
What value could you provide right now to a player development department, to a player development team, to a player development professional? If they hired you at this moment, while you listening to this podcast, if your phone rang by this certain university or to say certain professional organization or wherever you want to work, maybe it's high school, maybe it's a youth organization. If it rung right now, what value could you bring today to that organization, to that franchise, to that department, to that team? And today we're talking about value. Part one, we talked about doing your research. Part two, we talked about no one cares about your passion until you have a plan, creating a plan. And now we're saying, what is that value? So if you've done that step, okay, you've done your research on player development, you've done your research on player development professionals. Okay, boom, that's one. Okay, now you created a plan. Okay, boom, that's two. Now that you have that plan, what is the value you could provide right now? This is something that may come up if you get to this point where we're kind of walking through communicating with people or walking through starting. But if you get to the point and you're in front of a head coach or a professional, whatever it may be, you have to show them how you add value to what they are doing. How do you enhance the experience, the lives of the athletes who will be under your influence? Think about that. I'm talking right now. The phone rings and someone calls you and they say, what we need you to provide something by the end of the day. Day one. It could be an internship. You never know what can get you in the door. It could be internship. It may be a job shadow. You may be thinking you're going in just to do an informational interview in person. What if that person looks at you and say, what can you provide? You've been here 2 hours. What can you provide? What value can you provide to us right now? So you need to look at that. It goes back to the plan. You've already created a plan, but inside that plan, what is the value you can do right now? What's your strongest asset to the team? What's your strongest asset in your life? When you look at your leadership abilities or your personality assessment you may have taken, what is your strongest asset? What is your greatest value that you could bring right now?
There it is. Whenever I interview somebody, I wanted to know how they can help the department or the program. Lauren Hawkins, y'all have heard me talk about Lauren all the time on this podcast. When she came, she knew her value. She came to me and said, I can help in this area. And she did, right? So knowing your value is huge. All right, step 4. I'm going to come back to my guy, Arkeem Byrd, who just got the position with the Minnesota Vikings. Shout out to you, Arkeem. Skull, 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 skull. Arkeem, you laugh every time. Mr. Skull right there. But I'm going to go back to this. Step 4 is intentional networking. I'm going to highlight this maybe on LinkedIn or social media, but when Arkeem was a player at Wake Forest, he was still a player. He reached out to me in 2019. He said, sir, my name is Arkeem Byrd. I'm a student athlete at Wake Forest. I am interested in the player development position. I responded to him and said, hey, thank you so much for reaching out, but because you're a student athlete, I cannot communicate with you until you're done. There's compliance rules. Maybe I'll do an episode on that once before, but with the transfer portal, it could have been a violation. I could have lost my job. So I told him, reach back out to me when your eligibility has been exhausted or when you graduate, whichever one comes first. And he did that. He was like, hey, want to reach back out to you. I am done with playing. Matter of fact, let me pull up the message. All right, here's the message from Arkeem. Shout out to Arkeem. I'll truncate it. But he said, this was August 14, 2019 at 9:04 a.m. Thank you for connecting with me. My name is Arkeem Byrd, student athlete at Wake Forest. I was hoping to get a chance to talk whenever you are free to discuss about your role as director of player development. I will be a rising senior this semester, and player development is something that interests me as a future career. So I responded, hello, Arkeem. I will get with our compliance department and see how I can communicate with you. So then in between that, there was a conversation of eligibility. And he said, hey, he messaged back, intentionally networked, came back in March of 2020. Hey, I hope all is well. I recently finished my eligibility at Wake Forest and wanted to know if we could connect. Hey, Arkeem, absolutely. Let's connect next week. Boom. He told me when he was free. We connected that day. We got on the phone. Time goes on. Time goes on. We jumped on the phone. Boom, boom, boom. Later on in September 2016, he saw that I had a player development post. I was meeting with all the player development people. He asked, he said, I would love to jump on the call. I said, yeah, absolutely. We'll make space for you on the call. We stayed in it. We kept communicating. He let me know where he was in his career. He had accepted a position, University of Oregon in 2022. And we kept talking. I got to meet him. He spoke at the conference in 2023. He asked me two questions. I answered his questions. He spoke at the conference. We got to know each other. We got to build a relationship. And 2019 to 2024, 5 years later, he's working for the Minnesota Vikings. He is one of the best stories about intentionally networking. And I talk to people a lot. So-and-so, Antoine McClain, who's at Clemson last, whenever I say this, there's something called a player development ghost. Like, you can't be afraid to get ghosted by someone in the player development or player engagement space because a lot happens. I was serving 120 athletes. You're doing a lot around the campus and with coaches. And so you can't get discouraged. And Arkeem never got discouraged. He kept hitting me back. We built a relationship. He was letting me know where he was at. He saw that I posted something. He said, I want to join the call. He did an incredible job of intentionally networking in that he never said, hey, can I use you as a reference? Can I do this without knowing me? He let me know where he's at. We had a couple calls. We got to meet him. I actually talked to him this week. He just called to check in on me. We check in on each other. That is intentional networking. So shout out to Arkeem Byrd. He's doing an incredible job and I can't wait. Hey, the sky's the limit. 5 years, man. What he's done in 5 years is incredible. Check out this video on intentional networking.
You must be intentional when you're reaching out or communicating with someone in player development. Hello. My name is Ed Jones II. I am the host of this podcast, the Player Development Pod. This podcast is here to bring exposure to the player development field. Right now, we're in a 5-part series about getting into player development. And today we're on part 4. And today we're going to talk about intentionality. Now, to give a recap of what we talked about doing your research, creating a plan, providing value, and now being intentional in the reach out. So if we did a step by step, you would have done your research on player development and done your research on who you would like to talk to in player development. Number 2, you would have come up with a plan, some type of a plan in how you can help get stuff done, because no one cares about your passion until you have a plan. Number 3, you're figuring out what value inside that plan you could bring immediately. So if your phone rings and that person you want to meet with says, what can you provide my program right now? You're finding it out. And so as you have found all that out, now it's time to reach out. It's time to reach out to those in that space. You've done your research. You have a plan. You know the value you can bring. You want to reach out to them, but you want to be very intentional, very intentional. Once again, if you've done the research, you should not be in their DM saying, hey, I would love to talk to you about player development. I would love to learn more about player development. I would love to learn more about what you do. That stuff is found in their bios. And once again, hear me out. I'm not trying to be crass or rude, but I'm trying to be real and help you out. A lot of that stuff you can find in bios. You can research, as I said. Once again, I'm not going to get back to the research episode, but you want to be intentional. You should know. If you don't know, let me tell you this. Maybe you don't know. A person in that role, their LinkedIn messages are stacked. Their Twitter messages are stacked. Their Instagram messages are stacked. Their email is stacked. And that's just messages of people wanting to know about player development. That has nothing to do with the task they have to do, which is stacked. They are stacked literally. Every time they open up an app, there's someone trying to get their time. Every time they walk in the building, someone's trying to get their time. So you have to be intentional. You have to be smart. You have to put yourself at the beginning. One way you could do this, I actually did this with a head coach. I was listening to the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast. Shout out to Craig Groeschel. And he said he had one of his workers. She would always come in. She said, can I have 5 minutes of your time? And she would hurry up, get it done. And she always went under 5 minutes. And I did that with my head coach, and we had a lot of good conversations. It's 5 minutes. If you're, you tell somebody, let's say you reach out to someone and you say, hey, I would love to talk to you. 5 minutes. I have one player development question. It'll take 5 minutes. That gets people's ears going. Like, I'm more open to allowing you to have that 5 minutes, because a lot of people want a 30-minute call, an hour call, where they're the person, I'm on the line doing more work than the person who called me, and so you want to be intentional. What I would say is keep it in between that 2 to 5 minutes, and honestly, just give the question in the reach out. Hey, so-and-so, I love the work you do. You do an incredible job. I noticed that you did this program. This one phase of the program, can you tell me how you did that? You'd be surprised. Someone may reach out to you. Someone may give you a call. I'll tell you a story about being intentional. I was a high school coach at the time, and I was in a Starbucks, and Bo Porter was the manager of my hometown, Houston Astros, Go Stros. And I was sitting with one of my friends from high school, and I was like, I want to go ask him one question. And she was like, go ask him. I got nervous. I was like, nah, I don't want to bother him. He's the manager of the Astros. He's got things to do. He's just here for coffee. I kid y'all not. That was the longest latte ever made by Starbucks. So I finally get up. I'm like, look, if it's taking 7 minutes, I might as well go up there. I asked him one question. I said, hey, Mr. Porter, I know you're the manager of Astros. I love what you're doing. It was great. It was great for me to see him, because he's a black man, and seeing a black man in leadership, leading a team, a professional team. And I said, I have one question for you. What is the one thing that I want to be a head coach? At the time, I want to be a head coach. What is the one thing that I need to know to be in that role? He literally looked back at me and said, here's my number. Meet me here next week. I was like, whoa, I didn't know what to do, right? So then I meet him, and he opens up his life to me. I'm at dinners, with his group. I'm at a Super Bowl party. We still communicate to this day, and I still support him. That all happened from being intentional and having one question. I had one question. I did not say, hey, Mr. Porter, it's so hard for me not to call a manager or coach from playing football, but hey, Mr. Porter, do you have 30 minutes in your schedule where I can meet you next week? Can we meet here next week? Can I come to your house? Can you invite me to one of your dinners? Can you support me? Can you look out for me? Can you be a mentor, a reference for me? No, I asked him one question. And because of my intentionality and taking respect of his time, he opened up the door way more than I even expected it to be. Now, shout out to you, Bo Porter. I'm going to send you this clip. I hope you're listening to it. But once again, that is being intentional. Now, that's not going to happen with everybody. So let's not think that's going to happen with everybody. If you see Bill Belichick and you say, hey, Mr. Belichick, it's not going to happen with everybody. But the point of that story is I was intentional. I knew he didn't have a lot of time. I knew he was a manager of a professional sports team. I know there's a lot on his mind, but I had one quick question, and that's what happened. So the advice I would give you in being intentional is time frame. If you're going to ask for time, maybe you know this person, maybe you're working in the athletic department in another department, and there's a player development person work for a team, and you want to go sit down and talk to them. Can I have 10 minutes of your time as you walk to whatever? I just need to ask you for this much of your time. And then the other thing is one question. Just ask one question. Shout out one question to Ty Brown. He does a one question podcast, leadership podcast. Go listen to that. But it's amazing how one question can open up so much for people.
So there it is. Network intentionally. Don't just add people to add people or to say I'm connected to this person. And don't just hit up people when you need something. Don't just hit up people when you need something. Hit them up. Like I used the example of Arkeem. He was letting me know where he's at. He was looking at my post. He was talking about my post. He asked me two questions. He asked about, I think one was about how to use social media and the other one was about something else. I asked him how he was doing his job. He said everything was going well. He said, hey man, I know we talk off and on, but you're definitely mentoring me through your blogs and the book, which is in the show notes. He's like, I really appreciate you. And then he asked me two questions. He said, is social media important to player development? And I answered that for him. And then he said he saw that I had the title of associate athletic director or assistant athletic director at Baylor. And he asked, was there more, he asked if I was more in administration, or was I still working with coaches? Those are two intentional questions, So shout out to my guy, Arkeem. He's crushing it. If you met Arkeem, I'm so proud of him. He was a 2-time speaker at the Player Development Conference, where you can, there's a link in the show notes, Player Development Conference recordings. You can get the recordings from the 2024 Player Development Conference. Over 15 player development professionals, engagement professionals, and speakers, and incredible professionals sharing their story. You can get that today. And I'm just proud of you. Arkeem, if you're watching this, man, I'm proud of you. And then the last thing, okay? The last thing, and once again, I'll use Arkeem as an example, is to follow up. Follow up. I wish I could write it bigger. Follow up. I talked about Arkeem. You heard the message. He followed up. Hey, I'm done. I'm done playing. Hey, I got this job. Hey, I got a question for you. Follow up. When someone gives you access in this space, follow up. I tell people that all the time. They'll be like, hey, I got so-and-so's email, so-and-so's number. They reach out to me. Do I hit them up? Yes, they will always be busy. Do it. I told somebody, just hit me up. I'm always busy. It's a guy named Seth Mathis. Shout out to Seth Mathis. I said, Seth, I don't know when I'm going to be available. Just keep hitting me up. Seth kept hitting me up. One day he hit me up. I was driving home. I picked up the phone. Hey, Seth, what's up? Now, there's a balance. And shout out to Seth. He found out the balance. There is a balance. You have to have a balance because people, it's a lot in that role. Some days you just want to, I don't want to do anything. But follow up, especially when you're given the green light. If you're given the green light, follow up. Follow up. There's a reason they gave you the green light. Okay? Follow up, but be respectful with that. And check out this video here on following up.
Follow up. Follow up. You do not want to miss a grand opportunity because you did not follow up with the connections that you have made in your life, especially professionally. Please follow up. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm so excited to end our 5-part podcast episode series of getting into player development. Now, today's episode is special because last weekend we just had the Player Development Conference, and oh my goodness, it was incredible. The speakers did an incredible job. People were connected, and I am just, I'm on cloud 9, and I'm so excited about what happened this past weekend. And if you missed that, you missed out. In planning the Player Development Conference, one of our goals was for people to network. So there are a lot of you all listening here who were at the conference, and this is me telling you, follow up. Follow up with the connections that you made in the conference. Please follow up. It is fresh. We just had the conference. People remember the people that they saw, the questions that people asked, the numbers that they exchanged. So please follow up. Following up is important for 2 major reasons. Number one, it's opportunities. There's opportunities there, right? You may have opportunity that can come to fruition for you. Number two, it shows initiative to people that you follow up with. Now, am I perfect at following up? Absolutely not. Do I have to get better? Yes. But I will tell you this, I have grown so much and have seen the benefits of following up. I'll bring up a story about why I'm passionate about people, specifically young professionals following up, and students, young professionals and students following up. In 2022, I went to the Black Sports Business Symposium, and I'm sitting in here, I'm seeing all these Black professionals. I'm seeing CEOs, owners, executives, VPs, presidents, senior vice. I'm seeing all of this, right? And I'm just kind of sitting there and I'm like, wow, like just taking in the moment. And I'm kind of in my mode. I'm praying kind of like, man, God, this is awesome. Like, what can I do? What is the impact I can have before I leave? And I kind of feel like God was telling me to talk to the young man in front of me. So I tapped the dude in front of me, the young man. I tapped his shoulder and I said, hey, you know, where you from? I see you were at school, different things like that. He's like, yeah, I'm a student. And we started getting the conversation going. He's like, well, I'm really interested in player development. And I'm like, oh my goodness, look at God, look at God. And I'm like, man, like I tell him, here's my card. Whatever you want to learn about player development, call me. I will literally teach you whatever you need to know. I will sit down with you. I'll help you come up with a plan. I will fully give you full access to all the knowledge, all the documents, all the things that I have garnered over 6 years of working for 3 universities, 4 head coaches, and just that whole aspect of experience. And so he was excited. He's like, yeah, thank you so much. He saw me again later. I was like, hey, man. And I told him, I looked this young man right in his eyes around his friends. I said, make sure you follow up. And I told him that. I saw him one more time before I left. I said, I will not help you if you don't follow up. So I'm, coming back from the Black Sports Business Symposium on LinkedIn. I'm trying to connect with people. Let's do this. I say, hey, when do you have time to talk? Different things like that. And I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. I'm like, man, when is this young man going to hit me up? I'm like, oh, you know what? All right, it was April. So it may be the end of the semester. May, he's got to do his finals, different things like that. I'm giving grace. Okay, June hits. All right, maybe it's the summer, whatever. July, I'm like, oh, yeah, what happened to that young man? He reached back out to me 9 months later. 9 months later. And I think I responded to his message just because the kindness of my heart. I'm just trying to be a nice guy out here. But I'm not giving him that access because he had it. He had an opportunity. I told this young man, all you literally have to do is follow up, and I will open up the treasure chest. So I don't know if he's listening. I hope that you are following up now. And maybe I'll change that, but life's busy now. I got another kid, so I don't have that time. But if you're a young professional, if you're a student, and somebody gives you opportunity to tap into their experience, to tap into the diverse experiences they had, the diverse mindsets they've had, the mastery that they may have in a position, the good and the bad that they know about the position, but just the things that they know, please follow up. Do not miss a grand opportunity because you did not follow up. And that concludes our series of getting into player development. That is part 5. Part 1, do your research. Part 2, have a plan. Part 3, provide value. Part 4, be intentional. And part 5, follow up. This is kind of like a pathway of getting into player development. You do your research. You find out about the position. You find out about the people in the role. Then you start creating a plan. What am I passionate about? Let me create a plan. And then you say, well, what value can I provide right now? And then you intentionally reach out to someone. And then you follow up when they give you the opportunity. Those 5 steps are the ways that I believe you can get into the player development field.
You heard it in that video. There was a young man I was trying to help out. I said, I'm going to give you everything I learned. All you got to do is reach out to me within a week. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. Following up is so important because you never know when that person that's asking you to follow up, if they're in a part where they're like, you know what, I just want to bless somebody. I just want to give somebody some game. I just want to do, this is what I'm going to do. You never know. If you don't follow up, guess what? Somebody else will. So you might as well follow up. Here are the 5 steps that'll help you get into player development. Number 1, understand the role. Number 2, have a plan. Number 3, know your value. Number 4, intentional networking. And number 5, follow up. I hope that helped you all who are interested in the role, you all who may be college students, maybe trying to transition from another career. Hopefully that helped you. As I always say, go out and create generational impact. And if you got anything from this, share this with somebody you know. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or any other steps that you would have. Have a great one. God bless. And follow up, y'all. Follow up.